Good morning, YouTubers. Today we're going to do the water pump and thermostat on a 1999 Monte Carlo. It has a 3.1 liter V6. It is almost an identical motor to the 3.4 liter that you will see in Buick, Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles, and other Chevrolet model vehicles. First things first, let's take care of the prep work. Get you a big old piece of cardboard to put underneath because you're going to make a mess, and that is really quick cleanup. It'll soak up most of the antifreeze that we're surely going to drop on the floor. Save you cat litter or floor dry. The quality of the job will always come from the prep work. Let's get through this intro and get started. Alright, so the car's in the garage. Let's get started. Water pump is right here, at the very top. This smooth pump with 4 bolts. That's your water pump. Now if you follow your coolant hoses, the one coming from the radiator will lead you to your water pump from the bottom. Your top one, if you follow here, it leads you to your thermostat housing, which is going to be underneath your throttle body. It's going to require a little bit more disassembly to get to, so we'll probably do the water pump first for easier access and a little bit quicker job. Now, if you're not real familiar with the function of these two, now if you're real new or green to messing with cars and it's something that you're trying to get into or interested in, the purpose of the water pump and the thermostat. The water pump obviously moves the water through the engine block and circulates it through your radiator to extract the heat from the engine. It's all about heat displacement. The thermostat, which I'll get the new one out, most commonly it looks something like this. And what happens is it sits in your engine. When your engine reaches operating temperature, the spring will compress and it will open up and allow the water to flow to maintain operating temperature. When your thermostats often go bad, this will stick closed. It won't allow your coolant or antifreeze to flow freely anymore. So it just sits there and basically stirs up the water on one side of your radiator until it boils, and then you'll have boil over often out of your either radiator or your reservoir bottle. For a job like this, make sure the engine is cold and disconnect your negative battery cable anytime you do any automotive repairs. Now to get in a little closer, you can see better, this right here on top is your water pump pulley. This silver triangle is your belt tensioner. So first we want to release the tension from our belt so we can pull that pulley off. A good extendable ratchet works great. A 3/8 drive is what fits it. And you want to lift up to release that tension. Lift up. You see how when you pick up on it, the belt loses all of its tension. If your vehicle doesn't have air conditioning or power steering or anything has been deleted from it, then this may not be the belt path that you need to take. But if it is, hopefully that'll help you out some. Some people may loosen the bolts before they take the belt off, so it'll kind of hold it in place. But okay, here's how I do it. Put your screwdriver in this right there, put a little bit of outward pressure. Boom. Real easy. They break loose. I'll clean all this dirt and road grime off the back, just because it drives me nuts. If you don't have a magnetic tray, go to Harbor Freight, spend $4 whole bucks and get you one. Okay, so since I have the new part out, this is the face where the pulley goes. This is the propeller that moves the coolant through the channels in the block. You're going to have 5 8mm bolts that attach it to the water pump housing. Okay, so I have 4 out of those 5 bolts out. Once I pull that 5th one out, the water pump may take a little bit of prying. You may be able to grab a hold of that face of that where the pulley bolts, wiggle it back and forth, and it's just going to come right off. And coolant will pour out and splash some. So be prepared for that. Okay, so the old water pump's out. Probably lost around a half a gallon of coolant on the ground. There are things you can do to prevent that, but I need to flush this whole coolant system because I have no idea how old the coolant is in it, how long it's been since it's been flushed. So prior to doing any of this, you can drain your radiator and run a bunch of water through and then drain that so that your system's mostly dry. Or they make these cool plastic clamps and you can clamp all your 2 radiator hoses so nothing can flow from the radiator out through head pressure and dump out of the engine. So there's always different ways to do things. It's a matter of what you can do and what you have tool-wise, knowledge-wise, time-wise, and ability-wise to do. So once you start getting ready to put your water pump back in, make sure you have, it's a water pump thermostat silicone. It's like $6 a tube. It's like a little 1 or 2 ounce tube, just enough to do one little job. Go ahead and buy that. If you don't have it, you can use just a real thin layer of RTV silicone, which is what I'm doing. And we're ready to put this water pump back in. Make sure that the face of where you're going to bolt it on is clean, that there's nothing left of the old gasket, which from what I can tell they didn't even use a gasket on this one. I do not see one anyway, but you can take your finger around that edge and make sure there's no nicks or just trash that's going to cause this not to seal, because the last thing you want is a new water pump to leak on you. Now once again, something that I do that maybe other people don't do, you have 5 bolts, so doing a star pattern like you're putting a tire back on a car. Make sure that that seats smooth and properly up against there so you don't have any leaks. Now with the tools and a little bit of experience, you can knock this water pump out and I'd say about 20 minutes, especially if you have electric or pneumatic tools, which I do, but I don't want to make all the extra noise for the video. Okay, next we're putting the pulley back on. 4 10mm bolts. None of these bolts, they do have torque specs, but none of them should be much past hand tight. The last thing you want to do is spin the head out of, or spin the head off of one of these bolts and break it off and have to drill and fish that out and make a 20-minute job turn into hours. Okay, now our pulley's back on. Well, I thought I was going to zoom in. Okay, water pump pulley is back on. Grab a hold of it, make sure that it's not wobbling, make sure you got your bolts tight. Before you put the pulley on, do the same thing. Grab hold of the face of the water pump pulley, make sure you got those bolts tight so that there's no slack or play in them. Now we'll put the belt on and we'll move to the other side of the car and start working on the thermostat replacement. Okay, so we're on the other side of the car. This is in a real bad spot, but I'll pull the phone off my stand and get you a little bit better view in just a second. So first, like previously I said, follow this hose, and right here where it connects, that's going to be your thermostat housing, which also has a bleeder screw on it. That's what's on top of your water pump housing as well. You have to bleed all the air out of your line after you get all this done and filled it with fluid, because your water pump is a hydraulic pump. It has to have liquid in order to work. If you get stuck in an air pocket, then it's just going to airlock and not move the coolant for the heat transfer to keep your engine at operating temperature. First thing, I'm going to remove the air box, the air hose, so I can get down here to the throttle and unbolt it from the intake, and then we'll have full access to the thermostat housing. This is your bleeder screw. This aluminum tube right here is your thermostat housing. When you get back in there, it bends towards the engine, and your thermostat is going to sit in a little recess right there. Okay, upon a little closer inspection, you can leave the air box in and undo the hose clamp from it and the hose clamp from your throttle body intake, and pull this hose up and just pull that hose out of the way. And there's going to be two 10mm bolts right here on top for your throttle cable bracket. I'm going to undo those and pull that back out of the way and see how much access I have from that point. So this may be a little bit quicker job if you have enough tools to make it happen. Okay, I'm going to lean my stand in so you can get a little bit of a look. I disconnected the hose from here and the hose from here. Pulled it out. It does have a plug on it, so you can unplug it or be gentle with it. Your throttle cable bracket goes underneath like this. You can get it and just pull it aside if you need to disconnect your cables and reconnect them to reinstall. No big deal. Now you can see you still can't really access that thermostat housing, so this has to come off. Okay, so there's one 13mm bolt here and a 13mm nut there that disconnects this from the engine to get you down there. However, this is not factory, but these two hoses right here and right there will have to be disconnected to make that pull out of the way, so that you have access to unbolt the thermostat housing. Okay, there is actually three 13mm that hold this on. Once you get those other two loose, you can and loosen those hoses. I just twisted and spun it to get those hoses to pop loose. And then there's one more on this. There's a little the tube that those hoses connect to. There's one more 13mm nut underneath there. You got to get loose, and it'll come up and out of your. Okay, now once your throttle body is off, you can also kind of inspect. This has a bunch of oil in the intake. That's usually not a good thing. Leaky valves, stuff like that in the head. We're coming after this bolt, which is another 13mm. And then this bolt. And then this whole thermostat housing will come off. We can pop the old thermostat out, put the new one in, put those bolts back in, put all this back together, fill it back up with coolant, and we're done. Alright, now it's all back together. Disconnecting the throttle cables and getting them back on was actually kind of a pain in the butt, so be aware of that if you do so. I ended up pulling slack from here and hooking them, and then just spinning these around till I could get them to catch where they needed to catch. So now we're going to fill it up with coolant and burp the system. Now, I probably shouldn't have to say it, but I will. While we're filling it up with coolant to burp it, check your work. Make sure that everything you just did was done right and you don't have coolant leaks.